Hey team, welcome back to Game Time. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and as always, we have a impactful conversation with an impactful leader who just so happens to be my dear friend. Dilan Gomih is joining us today. Dylan is amazing,
Mm.
folks. I'm kind of glad we didn't record the things we were just talking about because it was heavy realness, but we'll get into it a little bit in this
No,
conversation.
I feel the
Every
same
conversation
way.
with
And
you,
I think
Dylan,
one thing I
is
genuinely
realness
appreciate
to the core, and I am
about you
so
is
blessed to have you in my life. So
realness
thank
is
you
your
for showing up here
brand,
today with me.
and you don't know any other way, and nor do I. So game recognizes game, my friend. Mm.
Well, that is so true, so true. And as I told you when we started, today was a day when I needed to remind myself who I am. So it's part of the reason why I'm wearing my leadership athlete shirt, because it's all about showing up for yourself first so that then you can show up for others and in business. And sometimes, folks, it helps to show up with another leadership athlete. So that's what I'm talking about that you're going to get today in this conversation with Dylan. So, what sparked this conversation was Dylan wrote a fantastic article in Forbes. It is entitled, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up, The Great Squeeze Q4 2025 Leadership Challenges and 4 Solutions. And Dylan asked me to share my voice and my perspective in the article. So it was an honor. The article is fantastic. Dylan, for one of the things you do is write for Forbes. You also are a keynote speaker, you're a well-being expert. So give people a little bit
Yeah,
of
I mean, I think there's
context
this
to
element of
what
we
helped
all go through our
inform
lives in
you to want
seasons.
to write
Let's
about
just
this topic.
fast forward to where we are. Labor Day hit. We expect work to pick up. We expect there to be that sprint into the
Mhm.
holidays. But in my conversations with organizations and leaders like yourselves, there is just this sentiment of something feels different. And I very much so spend my life driven more so by questions and the pursuit of what's happening. And the joy of being an expert in my field, where I focus on leadership, lifestyle, and longevity, is the understanding that those are my lanes. And I have this incredible ability to ask people that are smarter than me and involved in the community and in organizations in ways that I am not, to help me figure that out. So I think that was the first part, realizing that in my own work, in my own communities, there's this sense that something was different, despite the fact that we all knew what time of year it was. And some of the things that were surfaced by incredible people like you, and I do have to pause and highlight, I love and adore you, but the reason why you are such a powerful voice for this piece is you are somebody who regularly gathers, curates a group of senior leaders on a regular basis to say, hey, what's going on? What do you need? And how can your community support you? And I've had the fortune of getting to listen in on some of these conversations. And in addition to hearing insights from those people, you really have that pulse because you're constantly doing that. And the sentiments that you surfaced, as well as there was another incredible leadership expert on featured in the piece, Gina Coomber, is we know that there's technological disruption. That's not new, but this is different. Like we're really seeing yet another shift that is replacing rather than complementing what's human in the workplace. I think this other piece that is really important to differentiate, and I did my best to do so in the article, is it's not necessarily people don't care, right? In this push to deliver results in Q4. Well, this is what organizations do. Organizations exist to deliver value to their customers, to their shareholders if they're public, to deliver value to the world. That makes sense. Team members care, employees want to do a good job, but again, you highlighted it so well, and I want you to jump in because a lot of this were your insights that I'm just kind of reflecting. So correct me if I didn't get it correctly. Is this feeling of sprinting so hard, but not being deliberate and strategic in the midst of the sprint. And I'd love for you to chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is this crazy dynamic of rushing to try to meet these manufactured, some of it's manufactured deadlines, goals, those type of things in an environment that is so noisy in general. The news, Our phones are beeping, emails are coming in. It's this like hyped up, sped up world that we're existing in that has the additional pressure of AI and this push to quickly start using AI and quickly launch it with your teams. And the reality is, what we often feel is happening is that we're being forced to speed things up. And one of the things you and I talked about is a reality that AI theoretically helps us to condense time. So again, that's another reference to shortening things. Again, that makes us feel sped up. So it's almost like this tornado that's existing that we're trying to exist in. But I love how you talked about people inherently want to do well. People, and so what that requires leaders to do is to, in the midst of all this going on, in the midst of the tornado, is to actually calm, is to actually find pauses. You can even see, as I'm talking about it, my voice naturally, my cadence actually started to slow down. Those are things that I do for myself. And I'm doing it as an example for the audience that, again, if you're in this tornado of speed, the idea to match that speed or go faster, it's a human reaction, but that only makes it worse. It only multiplies that. So if we can calm a bit, find pace, then we can be, just as you said, Dylan, strategic, intentional, find the moments, brief moments to gather, as you were talking about in these leadership athlete huddles. And I know you mentioned Jeannie Coomer, who has the warrior circles, but these are so important.
What are the
You're creating those
really important
pauses
follow-on effects
during
of this.
the midst of
I'm
this
always
tornado.
saying this to leaders in the organization. It's your actions that matter, not necessarily what you say. So if, for example, you say it's okay to take PTO, well, your team isn't going to know it's okay until you do it. So that's literally being intentional with what you do. But there's also this ongoing narrative that is so worth continuing to shift, and it is a practice. It is intentional in that we all know theoretically going slower or being deliberate with your actions will lead to better outcomes. But this increased heart rate or like feeling like there's rustle and bustle and all that, like I don't even think I used accurate words, which is kind of what speed does. But it's really hard for people to accept that slowing down is a way to speed up. And this is when, in the midst of the technological shift, in the midst of the busyness, I always like to highlight society may have evolved, but as humans, we have not. So multitasking is not, it's not a human function. That's a computer function. We make mistakes when we try to do too many things at once. So as leaders, highlighting, okay, here's the grand vision for what we need to accomplish. As a team, let's think about the best ways that we can move forward and actually accomplish our goal, as opposed to throwing spaghetti at the wall and saying, let's use AI for everything, because AI can never fundamentally replace the judgment that you've had as a career marketer to be able to go like, actually, there's something special about this RFP that the machine may have missed. How do you not know?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I'm a basketball person. If anybody doesn't know this about me, now you do. But I've been absolutely obsessed with the WNBA this year. And something that I've watched is the commentators talking about some of these standout athletes like Paige Buckers and Nafisa Collier, and there's countless others. When they talk about their game and their ability to perform effectively and be that team leader, they actually talk about that their game on the court doesn't get sped up by the people around them. So I often use sports analogies because the way I describe that, you can imagine the frenetic energy on a basketball court during the WNBA finals. We're actually in semifinals right now, folks, but you can imagine that. But if you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off on the court, you're not providing that sense of calm and stillness for yourself so that you can hit your shot, or for your team who can kind of absorb that energy, observe you, and to your point, seeing that your actions are aligning with your words, your actions and words are aligning with your goals. And so it's something, again, as you did so well in this piece, to identify the issue, bring it to the surface, allow us to talk about it, which is so important. And then discover ways to work through it. One of the biggest
Can I
ways
add in
is
another C
to
because you
find
just put some
calm
perfect
and
alliteration
create
there.
that space in the midst
Calm,
of things being
create.
sped
Oh
up so
no, it's
much.
great. But I'm going to add in that last C of community. And in the piece, we highlight that there's research that does highlight that, at least in the US, something like over 50% of American workers feel lonely. And again, there's not perfect data for this, but I think it's a fair anecdote to say that as you ascend through the career ladder, you also may feel lonely because there's more responsibility on your shoulders. And that's the other dynamic that is at play. So, in the midst of speeding up, already having this existing pressure, trying to navigate new technology, feeling loneliness, and not necessarily feeling able to speak, even more fear about making mistakes. It's also an interesting just time in the world, not to get into anything too macro. And all of these forces compounding might make somebody feel, or organizations alike, squeeze.
Yeah, it is. The squeeze is such a great word to capture it because it is this squeeze feeling fearful about what's going on. So you're right. I do a lot of marketing work. Decisions by brands are being slowed, which you're seeing the impact on agencies. I do a lot of work with agencies. They're impacted. You're seeing hiring decisions slowed.
So interesting.
You're right about the duality. There's speed, but then the sort of one of the outputs of that is to slow down other things. To exist in this dichotomy, it does feel like this squeeze. Sometimes it's like the squirrel in the middle of the road. What do I do? Where do I? Because it kind of
Yeah.
chokes off your feeling of empowerment, that you can actually control controllables. I really appreciate the
Yeah.
way you've given that the name to it. I think naming things is so important, which can also help to combat that sense of loneliness. Because sometimes you can feel really lonely when you have a certain feeling, but you just don't know the words to describe it. You're not aware that other people are feeling it too. So it's like, damn it, I'm alone in this feeling. But what you've done in this article and in this conversation is to help give it a name, give it air, so that we can say, oh, all right, you're right. The community, the leadership athlete huddles that we have, I ask people to come, introduce themselves, share an ask and an offer. So again, there's a sense of vulnerability, but connection with other people. And it can really help fill that
I'm
void
thinking
and
two
relieve
things
a little
right
bit of
now, which is
pressure that squeeze forces on
are
people.
an incredible entrepreneur and you are blazing and raging successfully in this world. But I'm sitting here just contemplating how powerful that would be within organizations, right? Like having that type of leadership that goes, we actually need a moment to understand. Like this isn't about um, slowing the progress, but when you know weaknesses, strengths, how people can jump in and help, and just taking a beat for that. And you know what? Your huddles aren't very long, right? Like they're like 30 minutes. And think about what comes out of that, like the outcomes and how it pushes people forward, just how valuable that is. So I'm very struck by that notion. And then just to echo the sentiment of what you said around giving something a name, and I kid you not, in real time, I'm kind of processing how powerful that can be, because to the point of loneliness, it's very easy when you're in the sprint and in the hustle to feel like it's just you and it's just your feeling. When in trying to give it a name or trying to highlight that it does feel different, my hope is for people not to feel alone. And the hope is for organizations to kind of go, we are facing a moment in time. That's not bad. This is also not the first moment, right? We've had that is one of the things where like I'm certainly not like an toxic positivity person, but I'm a realistic optimist. And the reason why we are here in 2025 is not because we've never had a bad moment in our market, in history, or in the business landscape. We have, and we have overcome. So this is yet another moment in time, but it's worth naming that and articulating that, and then saying, okay, well, what are some lessons we learned from last time? What's new about this time? And then how can we make sure that on the next side, we're like a stronger, more resilient, ideally calmer. I love that word. You've also noticed my tone shift. I'm learning from you. Workforce and people, and society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love when you brought up the topic of when multitasking, that's what computers do, the robotic. And again, then you brought it back just a moment ago about humanity, right? And so in the midst of needing to be productive, efficient, adopt new technologies, that connection to humanity, it answers so many things. It allows people to feel human in their daily work. Hence, the connections are stronger. Loneliness can come down. But I'm pausing and giving it a but because you and I are talking about this this is stuff we talk about all the time, right? We literally do, folks. We talk about these things all the time with each other, with other people. So we're able to see tangible solutions probably more quickly, or they're more at the ready for us in our own, call it toolboxes or leadership athlete language in our lockers. But as we're closing this out, in the article you talked about 4 strategic solutions, and I want to make sure that as we end this, arming leaders with them. One of them we've talked a lot about is connectedness, community, building intentional communities. So with the time we have, can you dive into anything more you want to say about the community aspect? And what are the other
Yes. So
3
I'm
so that
going to go in
people
order, if
feel
that's
they
okay. If you have the
have
article up, we're
either
straight up going in order.
refreshed
And the
or
first one was
new
to slow
things
down to
that they
speed
can
up decision
try
making. So
for the
that's what we
path
spoke
forward?
about at the very beginning. And that's this element of not pausing progress. But I would particularly highlight this to individual leaders, which is, when you're in a meeting and your heart is racing or you have a headache out of nowhere, it's not haphazard or out of nowhere. Like, that's actually your body's response sign to something, or just stress and anxiety. And that's not to say you're in a burnout or incapable of moving forward, but it's just a sign to go, wait, what's making me think about that? Oh, I just got a deadline that I know with my capabilities and expertise is probably unrealistic for my team. So slowing down to like interrogate why you might have an anxiety response is actually a really powerful way to lead to clear decision making. So that was part 1. The second one is, especially if you are somebody who is anything above middle management, right? Middle management, senior leader, C-suite leader. You've now reached a phase where you have a team, and as opposed to having to always give the answer, you hire a team for a reason. And ideally, it's not necessarily just to execute. The best leaders I've found guide and kind of solicit responses from the brain trust. So getting in the habit of, even though things are quick, there are times that you're going to have to delegate, and there's times that it's probably worth it not to be the only person talking. And
Wait, exclamation points, folks, actively listen. A dear friend of mine, Marcus Glover, is the first person who I ever heard talk about this, was the 1 mouth, 2 ears ratio. Again, active listening. And I love what you're saying there about empowering the people who are working around you to use their voice, to share perspective, to give
100%.
the answers, and to know,
this
zip
is
it,
probably
because
jumping
the
ahead to you
answers
don't have to do
don't
it all
actually
alone
come
piece. But
from you at the
again,
top.
like, this is part of the stress of leadership, is feeling like everything is on you. And the reason why you have a team is to increase your capacity. Like, ideally, having a team should give you more leverage and lead to 1 + 1 = 3. And if it's just you, well, then it's just you. And then strategy 3 is, again, just highlighting this element of, we are humans that are part of organizations, part of the workplace. And this is why I use the word well-being over wellness, because we are beings that need to be well. So how you actually manage yourself during the day, actually getting up and moving for even a few seconds after you've been sitting at a desk for 3, 4, For some people, they don't move at all during the day. Actually does matter because movement makes your mind better, which is one of my favorite phrases. People more often than not wait until somebody else asks how they're doing before they ask themselves how they're doing, versus you can give yourself information and go, how am I feeling? Okay, I'm irritated. Why am I irritated? Okay, I need to do something to change my energy because these are people, I respect them and I work with them. They're not my family, so I can't really be snapping at my team like that. That's not really the way we lead. But anyway, checking on your own well-being. Go ahead.
That is so important because it goes back to this whole concept that I have around leadership athlete, so that it starts with you. You first have to be able to lead yourself. So I shared with Dylan before we started recording that I was having a very challenging mental health day today. And because I've had a lot of practice doing these check on myself, figure out what's the source, and then very quickly go to, well, what am I going to do about it? I practiced that a lot, so it came to me very quickly. I stuck my t-shirt on, this Leadership Athlete t-shirt. I thought about the fact that I was going to be in community in this conversation with a dear friend, another leadership athlete, and I was able to shift myself out of that self-talk mode that was only allowing me to spiral. And then getting on the call, and we first talked about on this recording, actually, before we started recording, and just saying it out so that I wasn't hiding it. So again, show up for yourself first. Ask yourself those questions. And here's the thing, it is a practice. As we're talking about it, it may seem like, oh my God, that's actually going to take a heck of a long time. But as you practice, it becomes more natural so that you can get where you need to be.
It's that simple acknowledgement that when it comes to leadership or any healthy routine you have to build into your life, it's a pursuit. It's a constant practice. We are both people that are advocates of well-being as a performance strategy. And we just talked about so many things that we ourselves have to manage. So it is an ongoing pursuit and it is never about perfection. And then the last one is something you do so well, which is building intentional community. And it becomes even more important the more senior you are, because you can't actually vocalize everything to your team. It's not their burden to carry. And also it's not the professional part, it's a yes and. So having a peer set, having people you can soundboard with and do so safely is even more important. And I always kind of highlight, you need that mentor, you need the sponsor, you need the wine buddy and the WHINE buddy, both things.
Dylan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being the force you are on this planet and being a part of my journey. Folks, if you love what you're hearing Dylan putting out in this world, please follow her on LinkedIn. Check out her writing. She's another Forbes article dropping soon, which I will be sharing. And then also imagine having this type of thought process and the strategies integrated into your own company. So consider Dylan to come speak or work with you. And then let me know if you're interested in finding out more about the Leadership Athlete
and for being the voice that you are.
That's it. We're going to end it there. Thank you so much, Dylan. And thank you, everybody. Have an awesome day. Thank you.